I was always the only brown person in the room. It was not until that second Monastery Groove camp where a lot of these people are saying they've never been in another room with an Asian writer, artist, producer at all. That's crazy. Where are all the women producers? Systematically, our business is filled with misogyny and toxic masculinity and is very much a boys' club. It comes down to the room. It comes down to who's on the credits. And primarily, sessions are led by cis white males. And I'm like, okay, what can we do on a small scale? Let's start a songwriting camp. So more than 70% of the songwriters were women. There was 12 to 13, 14 cultural backgrounds represented, which is awesome. Wow. Therefore, there's different perspectives in every single room. It's diversity happening in the room. I think my biggest qualm with music now, especially in pop music, is like everything sounds the same. So what's the next difference? It's your upbringing. It's 1,000 hours of music or films. And with the new normal, the number one thing is like inclusivity, bringing in diverse voices.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. Third edition is out now. All formats, hardcover, ebook, audiobook, however you like books, you can find it. Today, my guest is Ralph Torrefranca. He is the executive director of A&R at Angry Mob Music. That's where he leads creative development across the company's songwriter, artist, and producer roster. And with nearly 2 decades in the music industry, Ralph has built a career around championing emerging talent and nurturing long-term artistry. At Angry Mob, Ralph has signed and develops a bunch of songwriters and producers, including Bryan, who co-wrote Shaboozey's song My Fault on the Shaboozey album that went platinum. The song My Fault features Noah Cyrus. He's also signed and developed Jake Scott, with platinum certified at hits including Russell Dickerson's She Likes It. Joe Pepe, who co-wrote Ian Dior's song featuring Travis Barker and Machine Gun Kelly, their song Thought It Was. We actually spent a bit of time talking about the story behind how that song came to be and the controversy around it. And he told me a practice that I'd never heard of in terms of when we got into the splits conversation of just how publishing and songwriting gets split up and all of that. And Ralph also, he is the founder of Angry Mob's New Normal Writing Camp. It's a diversity-focused songwriting initiative, and he wrote this widely shared Billboard op-ed on equity and representation in writers' rooms. You can go check that out. We'll link to it. So we talk a bit about writing camps and just diversity in the music industry or lack thereof. And he's also a very talented songwriter, artist himself. He fronts a post-punk band, Cuffed Up. I've actually seen a bunch of their shows around LA here. He's super talented frontman, singer, artist, guitar player, all of that. And he's an award-winning filmmaker. He wears many, many hats, as we all do in LA. But today we spent most of the time talking about the business of publishing, songwriting, publishing, all of that, and how and who he decides to sign to Angry Mob, and just also like what sessions are, how sessions get put together, how cuts work, how royalties work, all of that. This is a learning episode for sure. But Ralph was super open and transparent about everything we talked about. Again, we got into some controversial topics here of how publishing is broken down and who is entitled to publishing and who gets it. He talks some battles he's gone in and the conversations he's had with artists and managers and other publishers, and it gets pretty juicy. It gets pretty saucy here. So I really appreciated Ralph's transparency, and I hope we don't get him into too much trouble with this episode, but I think you're really going to dig it. You can find Angry Mob, and this is actually the second episode we've had with someone from Angry Mob. If you like this, we had the founder, president, owner of Angry Mob Publishing, Mark Caruso, on not too long ago. But you can find Angry Mob on the socials. You can find Ralph also on Instagram, Ralph Torrefranca. You can find his band Cuffed Up there as well. Find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on the socials. Find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. But right now, if you wouldn't mind, just pause this episode, leave us a 5-star review, however you're listening to this. Leave us a comment on Spotify or YouTube or Apple Podcasts. And most importantly, though, if you wouldn't mind, visit aristake.com, get on our email list. That's the best way to stay in touch with us, aristake.com. Get on our email list. Don't forget to hit the follow, subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. All right, let's kick into the show. Ralph Torrefranca, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, we had the founder of Angry Mob, Mark Russo, on not too long ago, and got kind of a nice overview of independent publishing and the independent publishing space. And we got a lot of great feedback on that. People getting a little insight into indie publishing world. And but I'm really interested to talk to you about kind of the A&R side of that, the human component of publishing, because you work directly with the songwriters who you bring on. So start off, just like give us an overview of just like what A&R is at a publishing company, specifically Angry Mob and specifically an independent publishing company.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I explain it usually, like at first, is like, okay, A&R at a label is like very different from A&R at a publisher, because the actual nature of our job is that we're involved in creating the art, like creating the actual song at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
A&Rs at labels, as a lot of people would understand from definitions of like A&Rs in the 70s, 80s through, till now, are, in a lot of ways, bona fide marketing people. They're there to just like take the songs and go and market it, right? And then, somewhat creatively figure out how to package those things. In the A&R publishing world, as it applies to most A&R publishing, if it be like indie or majors, that we are creatively involved in the team. We sign the songwriter. We sign the songwriter who could be an artist and a producer, or purely like a co-writer, or all three, or two, and look after the songwriting career. And a lot of it is just coming up with ideas, setting up sessions, pitching their songs, to other artists, finding ways for them to make passive income. That could be also involving sync, TV, film sync, which is usually an arm of a publishing company, of which we are our side of the company with the sync team is very busy and really important to that, especially for the indie publisher. A lot of that money does come from sync. So it's but for the A&R, we're creatively involved in the direction of molding ourselves to what the writer is trying to do, if they're just a producer, or if they're also an artist, and like, are they trying to co-write? It's like a one size fits all, but we're like molding ourselves to each writer who we represent, basically.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's a great overview. So I want to talk about some of the things you listed. You of course sign the songwriter, you set up sessions, you work on pitching songs. So talk to me about, like, if you're going to sign someone, and you mentioned kind of three categories of someone you might sign, like a songwriter, a producer, or an artist, or someone might be all three. Right. How do you decide who you're going to sign, and what kind of goes into all of that process?
Yeah, I mean, there's different types of approaches to it. Most A&Rs at major publishers are chasing after like big shiny things. Typically there's usually some sort of bidding war, or in some cases, I won't mention which companies, but like they tend to, like, it's a smash grab. What
does that mean?
They have money, so they're just gonna let's say they find a writer who has, like, happens to have like a chunk of a really big song, but it's their only credit to their name, but they're not really like a developed writer and stuff. They will offer them a shit ton of money to, like, sign them. For an indie publisher, like truly indie publisher, I'm not talking about like a Cobalt, where they're like a tech company, like making.
Cobalt's the fourth largest publishing company in the world, and they're technically independent, but they're
definitely not.
Massive
Yeah,
company.
exactly.
Correct.
And they just literally made a deal with an AI company, so they're purely an actual technology company. And so when it comes to true indie publishers like us, like, our signings are make or break. Like, they resonate through the whole company of, when we only have 10 plus employees really working, like globally, like for this one small company, the process that goes into it is, like, first off, for me, especially for me as an A&R who is also a creative and a musician and a filmmaker and everything else, like number one thing is like, do they have ego? If they have way too much of a big ego, I honestly don't care how good they are. Like I can't, I have to work really closely with them and their team. And if I can't, personally invest myself in them as, as people that I want to like put all this time and effort into, I honestly won't consider it. It's just that's my deal breaker immediately. And me and Mark had that conversation the other day where I'm like, that's kind of what it's been for the last 10 years I've been at the company is that like, that's like the North Star. The talent is something that for me, I innately, I guess that's why I'm an A&R by trade, but like, I could tell when the talent's there. I could tell when it's like something that I could really like nurture and coach and like, and be that like, team member that could really bring an element to them that like I know that could raise the stakes and raise the bar for them being really talented already, and seeing if I'm a good fit for them. I think that's like the other the third biggest thing is like, do I work in the genres that like that I could really help them with, when it comes to like I love R&B, I love pop, I love that's like my bread and butter in a lot of ways, but like our platinum and gold records are all in country music, and that's in a lot of ways it's because the song's a song. I didn't sign them because they were going to do country. I signed them because I thought they were really good songwriters.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. So music is inherently subjective.
Right.
People, you're going to find, you play the same song for a group of 100 people, and some of them are going to hate it, some of them are going to love it.
Yeah.
So it's hard to speak in terms of like, obviously you have taste and you,
Sure.
likes and your dislikes, but when you're putting your A&R hat on and, it's of course, publishing is a business like everything else in the music industry. It's just like, okay, what does good mean in a publishing world? Like, what are you actually looking? Because you say like they have talent, but what does talent even mean? Because like you wouldn't, let me just, in perspective here, like you're probably not signing like, a Bon Iver or something like that, or like a McGee before Justin Bieber, but like like
pre Bieber,
pre Bieber McGee, no, but for real, it's just like you have these artists that are making these art projects. They're not writing pop songs, and so just like a little, give us a little more perspective. Just like when you're thinking about what talent means, what does that mean through the lens of a publishing A&R?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a big part is taste, right? Like, does it resonate with me? Does the songwriting like mean something to me? Like, is it saying something that's like new? Is it saying something that's like that? Obviously, like when I listen to it, I'm like, wow, that could feel like a timeless classic. Like that feels like a song that could withstand time. Because I've heard songs where, like I'm like, well, I've heard that like 1,000 times and it's the same song. And it's, a lot of people are writing love songs, right? And sure, there's going to be the tropes of a love song that you're expecting.
Yeah.
But it's the songwriters that write the unexpected that I'm like really amazed. And that's what kind of like hooks me in when something really truly just like makes me like stop and be like, I haven't heard that before. And that those are the swings that we want to take, especially as a small company, are on those people that like truly, when I listen to it, when I show it to Mark, when I show it to the rest of the team, who all have to also listen to it and like give their input, because obviously the sync team needs to know if they could work with it, right, too, as well. And if everyone's like turning their heads going, whoa, I haven't heard this perspective before, that's when you know that the songwriter is doing something that's like truly special. And that's what we're looking for in the songwriters that we're trying to sign.
Yeah. Are you also taking, and that's great to hear, and I love that. Are you also taking into consideration the cuts they already have or the success they've already had?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%.
Okay.
I mean, we're not trying to sign like a baby songwriter for the most part. Like we're trying to work with people that already have some sort of connection into the world, that like comfortably are able to say like who they are and like what they're like looking for in their career. But on the flip side of that too, it's like they're who's on their management team, like who's like actually there that's they could depend on, and people that I'm going to be working with on a daily, like that's going to be like a really big factor on it, because signing a songwriter that doesn't have a manager, sometimes it is technically a negative, because like you're looking after someone that also needs someone that could like really be their person when it comes to things that we're not involved with, like necessarily like master rights or something that like maybe the deal doesn't cover, and they need someone to be on their team, if it be a manager or a lawyer or someone,
Right.
So we're definitely looking at that. We're looking at the people that are that have some sort of history and relationship, who are a part of the community, which is a huge thing. Can I ask people about them? Can I look on Instagram? Does it look like they've already written with some people I know? I think that's part of the vetting process. And then, the second part is who's on their team, and can I trust them, and do I like them as people?
Cool. Now, of the three categories of kind of people that you sign, the songwriter, the producer, the artist, talk to me about kind of what that looks like when you're bringing on, let's just say, I think everyone's familiar with what an artist is. They're recording they're writing their music, they're recording their music, they're putting it out under their name. That's an artist. So that's pretty clear cut, I think.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like songwriter producers, tell me about what the process is of kind of growing their career. Like what is a day in the life of a signed songwriter with Angry Mob, or a signed producer songwriter, or all of that, and just like how do they work, and how do you work with them, and just like how does it what goes into that?
Well, it's first off, it's really the relationship that I have with the songwriter. Like if it's a really strong relationship, do I know like what they are aiming for the year or overall in their career? Like, are we on the same page with what their expectations are? Like that's a big thing. So we talk about all of that stuff throughout the year. I check in that way. We obviously talk, multiple times a week, and I'm checking in and everything else, and seeing how that's going. But like, usually it's like, okay, what sessions do you have coming up? Who are you working with? I have some ideas, or maybe like, can you give me some ideas, and can we brainstorm off of like, who the type of people that you want to try to be in with coming up? Is there any cuts that are coming up that's gonna like benefit to give us like a good advantage to be able to like go to certain people and ask like, hey, Bailey has a cut with Shabuzi and it just went platinum. Great. So
Bailey Bryan, right? Yeah, with
Bailey Bryan.
her song, she wrote "My Fault" on the Shabuzi record that went platinum.
Yeah, exactly. Featuring Noah Cyrus, and like that stuff like that. It's trying to find ways to be like, okay, cool. Like, are there any fans of Shabuzi that producer and writer wise that maybe might want to write with Bailey, or artist wise? Like it's stuff like that. It's like basically being really strategic, and then finding ways to like. And ideas to get into rooms that maybe we haven't been in before,
Yeah. Let's talk about that. So getting into rooms, what does that mean? What does it mean to kind of get into, or you said you're going to be in with, these people that you might want to write with. What's that process like?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to it. So one is the writer themselves have existing relationships, or they're meeting people. That's what I say all the time with publishing. Like, I literally say this to anyone that we even consider signing, is like, don't expect me to be doing your entire job. Like, this is a collaboration between you and me. Like the proactiveness of you putting yourself out there, having people understand who you are, and like going to functions and then like trying to get into sessions yourself, like that's equal parts like important. And then the other 50% is me coming up with ideas, pulling in strings, like my pre-existing relationships, or even reaching out to people I know that like that I don't necessarily have direct relationships with, and then pitching them and asking, seeing if it would be a good fit. Like that's naturally like, a big part of my job. And then setting up the sessions from there if they are interested. And then they get, what happens is that they set up a day to go into the studio, if it's our studio or the producer's studio. And then they have, sometimes we have a brief, sometimes we have an idea of like what we're looking for. If it's an artist, they already have an idea of what they're trying to do for their album. If it's a writer on our end who is, meeting with a new artist, it's like talking for the first, Ross Cullen says that you talk for the first hour about life, and then they start writing it. Like there's a lot of different ways that the session could go, but really primarily it's like setting up a day so all the writers and the artists and the producer could get into the same room and write.
When you're kind of helping facilitate that process, and you're getting one of your writers or producers into a room with some other writers, is there an intention that's part of this? Maybe if there's not necessarily the artist in the room, is there an intention for this? So, like for instance, Joe Pepe, one of your signed producer songwriters, co-wrote the song that the artists Ian Dior, Travis Barker, Machine Gun Kelly, MGK put out called "Thought It Was."
Yeah.
I counted 7 songwriters on that song. Maybe 8.
Do you see the big one that's on there?
Dan Wilson.
Wilson, yeah.
Yeah, right. Dan Wilson, of course, of Someone Like You fame, who wrote Adele's Someone Like You, but also Closing Time, Semisonic, and Dan Wilson. I mean, he's got so many hits, so many Grammys, right. So like, I'm curious how a session like that goes down, or in general, when there's like so many, I'm assuming all 7 or 8 or 9 of those people didn't all cram into somebody's studio together and then are like trying to get a word in. I just like break down how some of this works when like such a huge, when big artists kind of release this stuff with all these powerhouse songwriters and producers, like how does that even work?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. That song is a really good example. So basically, like with that song, and it happens in like hip hop. I mean, R&B and hip hop are the biggest. Like that's where it happens the most, because just like in this instance, the song changed hands. Like the song went to someone else did something else. The song went to someone else, someone added something, and in this particular situation, the publisher that owns the entire copyright or the publishing to Dan Wilson's catalog, including Closing Time, which this song is a flip of. The song is Closing Time. It's a flip of Closing Time. What happened was they were like, hey, Joe, and then the other 2 writers, do you guys want to flip the song into a new song? We have 100% of the publishing. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So the 3 of them go into the session, and then they write a new song, but uses the same chorus hook. And then from there, they want to pitch it to an artist. So they want to, from there, like we start sending it out. It got messy because the original publisher sent it to this other A&R's whose only job is to send it to other artists. But the trade-off is that, I won't say his name. You could just, look on Spotify. He has his own Spotify page too as a songwriter, but like motherfucker didn't write a single lyric. He basically just takes a percentage of the songwriting. 100%. Man, I don't want to say his name so bad.
That's wild.
Yeah, I know. Come at me, bro. But that was a big learning experience for me, where by the time it got to Ian, and then by the time that Travis Barker, co-produced the song, he brings in his producer who did a lot of the work, and then Machine Gun Kelly. Like suddenly the pie got really small. And they're cutting in Dan Wilson's. If people don't know about this, like when you flip something like that, like the original songwriter will probably have half the song as he does. So like he takes half the publishing. Okay. So the pie gets really, really small. And then by the time it got to the release, there was all this drama that was surrounded it because people couldn't agree on the splits, and that's really that's normal in R&B and hip hop, but like in this case, it also a song that like, you know, tracks across all the genres. Like we got into that, and it took a long time to agree on it. And by the time that happened, you know, the single wasn't really a single anymore because of all the headaches and the drama that came behind the scenes. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, exactly. But all that to say, what happens is that a song could be passed along down the line, and then next thing you know, you have, you know, 18 songwriters on a Beyonce song because something sampled, something is, you know, some guy did something, and then their reps are trying to get more, and then suddenly there's 18 songwriters on the song, of which is a sample based on a
Right,
sample.
and of course, the artist always wants to get a piece of that, publishing a piece of the song, even if they had nothing to do with it. And
Right.
I mean, you know, Beyonce is a well-known case of that. But there's a lot of most superstars. I mean, I don't know what Machine Gun Kelly or Travis Barker contributions were to this song, but they have publishing. So you know, it's, and then you said, and the guy, which I haven't heard before, which is just insanity.
Dude,
to me, criminal.
It is unfortunately more common than you think.
That there's just going to be somebody who's going to make a connection, be like, I want a piece of that because I made the connection.
Because, I mean, I shouldn't be saying this, but because the original publisher didn't negotiate any sort of deal. Their deal was like, okay, you take a part of the publishing because they own the original. They own Dan Wilson's catalog that won't get touched. Like that portion will not get touched. So they have less incentive to protect any of my songwriters or any of the other songwriters.
Right.
You know?
And talk to me about the politics of it all, because it's like, all right, Dan Wilson's publisher, they're like, fine, we're getting a 50%. Y'all do whatever you want with the other 50% and figure it out.
Correct.
But like now you have all of these other parties. You have managers. You have other publishing companies.
Yes.
You guys, you know, not to mention when it goes to like the artist and like their label and their management and all of it. Just like, tell me how that process works. You said when it got to the end, it got all messy and stuff, but I mean, you can even speak in generalities. Just like, how does that even go down?
Well, what happens is like the managers start like, you know, the manager of the time at the time for Joe Pepe was like, oh, there's a red flag. There's something happening here. Why is suddenly, you know, usually what happens is that we got an email and I recognize a name that I saw a name cut into the pie that like I didn't recognize. I'm like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Yeah. And I started looking up. I'm like, this guy's an A&R. Why the fuck does he have songwriting on this? And then I start digging, and I'm digging, and then I talk to the managers, and then I finally get, you know, Ian's manager, who's great, finally came down the line and was like, apparently the original publisher sent it off to this guy, and then this guy was the guy who sent it off to Ian, but their deal was that he gets cut of the publishing. And I'm like, what the fuck? And so so it's a lot of like, getting like blindsided and going down the line. And this is great. Wow. I'm happy to talk about this completely like candidly, because it's something that a lot of people don't, I think, see behind the scenes especially in the publishing world, behind big songs. Like by the end of it, we were the last publisher that was like the holdout, where I was saying like, it was so vivid. I was on the beach in Ventura. It was my fucking birthday. It was my day off. I was zooming onto my phone, right? And my fiance is like sitting next to me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I got to take this. And I'm pleading to every publisher on that song, please, it's going to set a precedent. Mm-hmm. If we let him do this, it sets a precedent. And then what's the whole point of us being publishers when we're out there preaching, hey, we're here to protect our songwriters? And then everyone's saying like, I don't want to die on that hill. So I was like, I don't want to die. This is the hill we should die on, because this is something that like the percentages aren't really going to make that big of a difference if the song doesn't blow up. But it's like but it's really like it's us setting the precedent of like, we want to protect our songwriters. So that was what it was. And then we had to cave. We have to agree to it. And then, you know, the song didn't do as well as we wanted to necessarily. It was supposed to be played on Jimmy Kimmel one week, and then they changed the song because, you know, who knows? There was a lot of different, you know, politics behind it. That's why for us as an independent publisher, and I think that's a good example right there, is like, we're fighting. we're fighting
Yeah.
for our scraps. We're fighting for our songwriters. We want to protect them, and we want to make sure that, you know, things like this don't happen again. But that was, unfortunately, again, it's pretty like semi commonplace. People are always cutting themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at the credits online, and maybe this is a mistake or what, but I see that Joe Pepe is not listed as a writer. He's just listed as a producer. Is that correct, or what happened there?
Well, no, that's probably incorrect. Because
Okay.
he was fighting to actually get a producer credit. Actually, fun fact: we were trying to. He was not listed as a producer for like even after the actual release, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were just like fighting. They were fighting to try to get, you know, Joe that actual credit back, but they ended up giving it, which is good, and, you know, we settled everything else out. You know, at this point, it's like under the water. But like for me, it's more of like, you know, I want to protect the songwriters from especially our songwriters from that happening again. And it's the business at this point. You know, a lot of people are bending the knee because we want to get the cut. But the question is, at what point? When do you?
Right. Yeah, no, and I've talked to some other publishers and other A&R and stuff like that, and you know, I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing that an A&R is taking publishing. I was asking about, like, you know, what do you feel about kind of when the artist demands publishing when they had nothing to do with writing the song? I mean, is it a similar conversation you're having? It's like, well, I'm not going to die on that hill, or it's like, are they going to say, their manager's going to say either they get a cut or we're not putting the song out or something, or how does that all work?
Yeah, I mean, really, the artists have free reign to like basically ask for what they want, because they're the originators, and then because they don't really, you know, they don't necessarily need the cut. It would be nice. It's just like a passive income for them at that point. And so they really have, it's really dependent on, usually not the writer. Usually it's just the publisher and like, or the rights owners. And like, if they're trying to get, you know, how much money they're trying to get, and if they could be at least somewhat reasonable about it when it comes to like the cuts of the songwriters who made the new version, or like the flip of the song.
Yeah, well, I mean, on a brand new song, and just like, I guess more in general, like, how does it work? I'm sure now you've had instances where some of your writers maybe write a song on their own with a producer, and as it's getting passed around or sent over, an artist says that they want to cut it, and then maybe the artist is like, okay, we're going to cut this song, but only if they get publishing on it. Does that happen?
Oh yeah.
Have you experienced that?
Oh yeah, that definitely happens. I mean, yeah, it happens a lot. The usual business that happens behind that is like, if you pitch a song to an artist and they're gonna, you know, this happens country especially. You pitch it to a country artist or something. They want cut. They're gonna want publishing of it. So you have to give up a part of that publishing. The nice artists will only ask for an equal split with the rest of the writers. The not so nice artists will ask for, you know, a much bigger chunk versus the original songwriters.
Which is wild to me, because, I mean, for people that don't understand the difference between publishing and sound recording, I mean, the artist, the recording artist and the label, they're collecting the sound recording master royalties. And that's actually the vast majority of royalties out there for streams.
Yeah.
Around 80% of all the money that's paid out in streaming revenue goes to the master rights owner, the label, the artist, the recording artist, not the songwriters. The songwriters are only getting the scraps. They're getting about 20% of all streams. But like, you know, the big thing in publishing is why it's so important to have, you mentioned it a couple times, like the single, and we didn't get the single, and why it's important to get the single is because the way that a lot of publishing companies and songwriters are making their money is when the song gets played on the radio, because there's still money made in performance royalties when it's played on terrestrial radio.
100%. You need that radio hit's the only way that you can make somewhat of a living, and even then it's still, you know.
So let's, I mean, speak to that a little bit, because it's like, all right, when songwriters are, looking for these cuts and they're, get on a big record, or in a big album, I mean, I'm curious with this, Bailey Bryan Shabuzi song, My Fault.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, it's not a bar song, Tipsy.
Right.
That's the biggest song of last year and whatever. Right. But it still streams very well. Yeah. I mean, is there still? I mean, there's some money made, but like, how does that all calculation work? Especially with an indie publisher, is just like, all right, we're not getting the hit single, we're not getting maybe a single or whatever. Like, how does that all work? And like, are you just kind of like hoping that you get something on the radio, or you mentioned sync before? Just like, how does the business all work with this?
Yeah, I mean, what you're touching on is the fact that like payouts on streaming platforms for songwriters are pennies, right?
Yeah,
a fraction of pennies. And it's true. Like when you look at, we have probably at this point maybe close to 1 billion streams worth of revenue, right? Like across a bunch of songs over the course of the catalog. But the payouts are minuscule. Like what we want is the singles. We want to be able to get on terrestrial radio. We want to be able to have the lead single. We also want the album to sell, because like if they're selling physical copies of the album, then that's great. Like that actually that the payout on that is great for, especially if we have a producer and they're getting points on it too. It's like on their side, they're getting more money, which is great. That's why K-pop is such a big, it's such a big goal for a lot of people right now, is because it pays out well. Do
they buy physical product in Korea now? Is that they're buying CDs and
they buy physical things, but they buy full albums, which is huge. And then they like buy it. They're not streaming it; they're buying it, which is which is the biggest thing. And even when you look at Japan, I feel like it's an underused market in a lot of ways. Like Japan has Tower Records. Unlike, they have like 20, 30, they have actual stores and people are buying physical copies.
It's wild that still is so big there.
Yeah, I'd rather go huge in Japan and like sell a shit ton of albums than like have 100 million streams. Like it's not gonna,
right?
But that's gonna but the 100 million streams hopefully translates to live shows. Obviously, there's performance to live shows, performance royalties, and your songs being played. Like on tour, so that adds to it. So that's also something that we hope that like it's something that they play. Like for Shabuzi's My Fault, like he played at Coachella. We're like, great, and Noah came out, and we loved that. I texted Bailey. I was like, great moment. This is like a really big moment for you, and I'm really proud of you. And this is great. Plus, as long as someone registered that they played at Coachella, at least that's something.
Right. No, you get something there. Yeah. But so okay. You mentioned points for producers and how some producers get points. And just to clarify what that means is the producer is now participating on the master sound recording side. So the money that's made in those master royalties, some of that they will get the percentage points of whatever's negotiated. Of the artist's cut of those points. So it's like, but that is not super does that exist in songwriting? Not if you're not a producer. Are songwriters getting points on the master now? As like we established, artists are taking publishing, even though they don't have a hand in writing the song. Yeah. Is it going the other way? Are songwriters getting points on the master, even though they're not in like part of the artist, or label that are recording it, but they still wrote the song? Does it go the other way?
It's traditionally not the other way, which I think it should be, right? They should be involved in that part of the pie. That's why songwriters are so diminished in a lot of ways. They're kind of pushed down as like down the pole. And like I've heard of deals. We haven't made any of these deals, but I've heard of deals where some of the songwriters are demanding points, which is great. And like I think some of those deals have happened, but there's nothing. I haven't worked with any artists that have like want like agreed to it. You know.
Well, no, because points come directly from the artist's cut. It's not like the label's giving up anymore, and that's historically how it's happened. Now there are some indie labels like Justin Tranter, who is a hit songwriter. Yeah. He started a record label, and part of their standard course of operations is that they are cutting in songwriters into that. But it's still a smaller indie label and stuff. And yes, it would be great to have that as more commonplace, and especially not taking from the artist's cut, but actually from the label side. And historically, record labels are major labels take 80-some percent, 82% or whatever. Then the artist has like that 18%, and then of that 18%, the producer's getting a few points, and it's like, now we're diminishing the artist part of their pie too. Whereas all right, major label, you got 82%. Why not take 80% and give 2 of those percentage points to the songwriter or whatever? But no, it's tough. So it would take more, I guess, probably a bigger movement of songwriters, unionizing or something like that to create a new standard. I mean, is there any of that kind of discussion that you've heard about, or anything like of a movement that just tries to make things a little bit more equitable?
Yeah, I mean, there's my friend runs that group called the 100%ers. Her name's Rose. She's a great songwriter, and she also runs a camp that I sit on the board of called the Monasterio Groove, which is an AA NHPI specific focus camp, writing camp, and the 100%ers are always fighting for that. They're always trying to fight for trying to get the songwriters their due. So there's groups, there's advocacy groups like that are out there that are trying to do that, and there's people there's A&Rs like me who are hoping that we're trying to instill that into the conversation and seeing if that's an option. But the reality of the situation, if it's a bigger artist, they have all the leeway, they have all the advantage at this point, and it's hard for an indie publisher to be hey, could you cut the artists into the master too? Obviously we could ask that through the lawyer, and we could go and they could get shot down and stuff, but currently right now it's not something that people are, or at least artists are completely open to, or major labels or anything. They when you bring it up to the lawyers, most of the time they're trying to shoot that down. But we want to change that. If there's enough noise, if there's enough people, if a bunch of us publishers, if we band together, if the songwriters are all banding together and trying to make that a normal thing, I think that would be the momentum that we could get in there. But it seems like this is going to take time.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably 2020 or 2021, around that time that the 100%ers was formed. There was also what they called the Pact, and that was by Justin Tranter and Roscoe and Emily Warren and a bunch of other hit songwriters that basically they came together, and they had all these songwriters, professional songwriters, sign this petition saying we're not going to give up publishing to artists.
Yeah.
It seemed to fizzle out because they just couldn't hold the line, because it's the calculation is, all right, the artist says, or the artist manager really is saying either you give up publishing to my artist or we're not putting your song out. And then the songwriter's well, shit.
Yeah. Totally. And that echoes back to even the thing I was explaining about with that Ian Dior song is they felt the pressure. They were we can't risk the cut. We can't risk the cut. There's another writer that's going to come and pitch a song, and they'll take that song instead.
So I'd like to think that songwriters have some power here, because couldn't the songwriter just be well, then fine, if, then you're not going to be able to put the song out, but it doesn't really go, they don't care as much about the song because they just have a bunch of songs to choose from. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Unless it's a really big lead single, and that they're trying to put the machine behind it, then there's a little bit more pressure there. But ultimately, the songwriters and the publishers of this, and publishers of the songwriters, not the artists, we're out here trying to protect the slivers that we have at this point, and then asking for a little bit more that's actually reasonable, and it's sadly in the place of the industry where there no one's giving us the chance to do that because they can point to economy, they can point to like infrastructure or whatever, but it's really just comes down to business. They just don't want to give up a bigger piece of the time.
When in the process do splits get negotiated? And like you mentioned, like when a song gets passed around a lot, obviously that's going to change the implications. Sure. And in Nashville, they have this tradition of 1 word, 1/3, which is essentially like if there's 3 songwriters in the room, they're not going to haggle over splits. Everyone's going to get an equal third, an equal cut of that. But tell me how it kind of works in pop or hip hop or R&B, and when all that comes into discussion.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, we function on the same rule. It's the split it equal ways. Whoever's in the room. There's some circumstances where some writers want to bring up certain, like if it really feels pretty unequal, then they'll bring up, a reason behind it, and then that'll turn into a conversation between like reps and stuff. But for the most part, from what I've seen, at least all the sessions we're involved with, like it's always an equal split until until the conversation happens. But to say that too, like us as publishers, when we're pushing this on like our songwriters, and we tell people all the time, like we're all like, talk about the splits, please. Like on the first day, like try to like, because when you run into those problems, they become a really big problem, and that's how songs are held up for years. That's how people aren't paid out for years, because it's a he said, they said, she said like situation, and then suddenly, like we have a really big song, yet we haven't been paid, and it's been 2 years because there's a dispute, because someone who has 10% of the song was like, no. And you're like, what do you mean no? Like, I thought this was settled out. And they're like, no, we actually want, we agreed on 15%. And you're like, no, you didn't. And then from there, it becomes like a litigation issue where we're all like, our lawyers are talking and we're like trying to figure this out. And that's also very commonplace too.
Wait, so these so splits don't need to get worked out before a song comes out?
Nope. that's
wild.
No, well, it should be 100%.
Right.
As a publisher, I'm gonna tell you, yes, it should be worked out. They should be registered with, your PROs. It needs to be all, but we like literally just happened. I won't say with who, but like it literally just happened where our producer was like, hey, so-and-so's putting out the song on Friday, this song. I was like, you guys haven't even talked about splits. Like, do you know the splits? And they're like, no, our lawyers have to talk to the artist's lawyer because my name's not even on the credits. I'm like,
oh no.
Yeah. So that is that's commonplace. And again, that's commonplace, especially in like hip hop, rap, and R&B. Like that is the I think the biggest culprit of that happening. Pop tends to be a little bit more straightforward. K-pop is all by the book, but like when it comes to that world, a lot of people, if they do the session, you don't hear back from them. They'll run with a song, and then they'll make a decision like, oh, we're going to drop that song in a week, and then it doesn't go down the line. It doesn't come down to the writer who wrote like 10% of the song. They just don't know, but They have a publisher, and it would have been nice if they knew ahead of time and to be able to tell, hey, sync team, like the song's coming out, can you talk to your music soups, blah blah blah,
right.
So it's a lot of publishing is chasing, chasing after splits and chasing that's I think the biggest headache of the publishing world is that a lot of people, including writers especially, like they're not like responsible enough to like have the conversations early, because it honestly, and this is coming as a songwriter myself, it kills the vibe in the room if you're talking
kills
business.
The vibe. Yeah, no, it makes it's right. It's just like, when are you gonna whip out that split sheet in the session? Is it right?
Hey like, guys, so, can I get your IPIs, please?
Yeah, right. Before we get to the bridge of this song, can I just get everybody's IPI number?
Yeah,
right.
And then that's why for me, like I love running our songwriting camps, like the new normal writing camp that we have. That it's like the diversity focused writing camp. It's a Nashville split. Everyone in the room is going to get equal splits. And luckily before that, I'm the one who put everyone in the room. Therefore, I have everyone's information. I got everyone's
Yeah, that makes it.
PRO, publishing information. It's easy. That's immediately we could
Yeah.
start pitching it. But then, that's not the norm.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about new normal. Let's talk about the new normal writing camp that you started. I mean, you wrote an op-ed in Billboard that was passed around a bit, and it was just kind of talking about the diversity or lack thereof diversity when it comes to writers' rooms and sessions. I mean, there was a stat put out a few years ago that's probably still very accurate that under 2% of all producers or engineers are women. So talk to me about the op-ed you wrote says why diverse writing rooms must become an industry standard. And it's the new normal. And tell me about this camp that you started and just kind of your take on all of that, and when you're putting writers' rooms together, how you're thinking about that or why.
Yeah, I mean, first off, we have a South by panel talking about this exact thing about songwriting camps, which I don't think has ever happened. That's currently up for voting. So if anyone wants to go vote,
everyone go vote for that.
Go vote for it.
The panel picker's still open.
Panel picker, just search my name; it should pop up.
Cool.
But yeah, so that came out of me being a part of Monasterio Groove, Rose's group that does an AA and HPI songwriter camp every year, and from there I've been in the business this time. I mean, I sound old now, but almost 20 years at this point. And I was always the only brown person in the room. I was always the only Asian person in the room. And it was not until that moment of the second Monasterio Groove camp where I was like, wow, a lot of these people are saying they've never been in another room with an Asian writer, artist, producer at all. And I'm like, that's crazy. And then you start to think about it. I'm like, where are all the women producers? Oh yeah, that's right. Systematically, our business is filled with misogyny and toxic masculinity, and is very much a boys' club. And I'm like, okay, what can I do to change this? Well, it comes down to the room. It comes down to who's on the credits, and primarily, a lot of the sessions are led by cis white males, and it's really not anyone else. And I'm like, okay, what can we do on a small scale to start to implement some sort of change? Let's start a songwriting camp. And we did a songwriting camp originally in 2019, of all places, Nashville. And, we brought our writers there. They were really the only diversity that was in the rooms in a lot of ways. I will say that, but the writers there were great. And I had a really good experience. I'm like, okay, let me come up with a system. So I have a very specific system. The way I explain it is that book and then turned in a movie that called Moneyball that changed all baseball. Obviously, baseball is
the Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill movie. I love this movie, right? Yeah. And they study the numbers, and you don't need the superstars, but you need all the contributions of all the players based on their batting average and what they can do at the plate. And that's you calculate all that, and then you have this outcome where then you have a winning team.
Yeah, as a whole, you're seeing it. You're not signing a star. You're putting together a whole team that is as good, if not better, than that star, right?
Right.
So to me, I was like, okay, I'll figure out a new system. So I developed a new system for it, and then and I was like, let's do it. And then so in 2023, with the support of Mark, my the owner of Angry Mob and president, and I was like, let's double down on diversity. Let's do it. So what happened the first camp, as it did happen in the second camp this year, it's okay, more than 70% of the songwriters were women, which is great. There was 12 to 13, 14 cultural backgrounds represented, which is awesome. Wow. Therefore, there's different perspectives in every single room. It's actual diversity happening in the room. And then we'd bring in the artists that come from diverse backgrounds. So, the first one, it was primarily R&B. So we had Yuna and Deb Never. We had all these amazing people. And then the second one, I was like, great, let's expand. I come from the indie world. Let's bring in a lot of those people. So we brought in Say She, who is one of my favorite groups out right now, who was a 3-part, singing a new disco pop group, and I paired them up with a lot of people that they would not normally like work with, and it was great, and a lot of
Cool.
the songs, are supposedly going to be working on, end up on their next record, which is great. And so, uh, and the second time around, my number one thing, the number one thing I couldn't do in the first time was like get 50% of the producers to be women. And
Mm.
find them. I was like asking, I was like, does anyone know any, it's like, and then this time around, it was different. I actually, we hit the 50. I actually had more than 50%. I had people that spilled over that, women producers that I was like, I need you to come for the next one that we do. We're going to do this biannually. Like, let's do this. And so there is some version of change that's happening, which is really great to see. The fact that like, I don't have to ask too many people to reach like women producers who are actively like being really great, and like actually in sessions every single day. And
Well, yeah, I mean, that's great. So you're noticing that there is a change, that there are, that just from year to year, you found that it was not as difficult to find working women producers, but you're seeing that the tide is shifting.
Yeah, the tide definitely is shifting. It's not enough. It's definitely not enough
Yeah.
at all. It's still completely a boys' club, but like being able to say like, okay, here is, a producer who is like she's in she originally comes from China, but like she's here now and she's like doing pop music and it's like really great and no one knows who she is. And then and then she does the sessions and I'm blown away and I'm like, wow, this is why we do the camp, so people could discover each other and like realize that when you do bring in more diverse voices into the room, like you get a different perspective, but then it starts to sound different. Like I think my biggest qualm with music now, especially in pop music, is like everything sounds the same, and it's because we have access to all of the same tools. So what's the next difference? Like it's like your upbringing. It's 1,000 hours of music or films or whatever that you listen to. That's really what's going to make the difference on like who's if the song is going to sound different, if it's going to be special. And with the new normal, that's our number one thing is like inclusivity, bringing in like diverse voices, and then being able to like have those people like build really quality friendships and relationships so they can keep working together. And that's huge because most songwriting camps are purely just like networking opportunities. Most songs don't go anywhere, and that's also something I wanted to change. Is like, okay, I want to make sure like a lot of the songs at least go somewhere.
Yeah. So tell me about that. So one of the goals of this, sure, bring these people together, introduce them. They can get to know each other. They get in rooms. They write with each other. Yeah. That's fun. That's great. But yeah, when you say you want the songs to go somewhere, in practice, how does that work? But also, like, what comes out of these camps, and how do you place people together so they get something that can turn into something that will come out with someone? Like, how does that work in practice?
Yeah, I mean, we want to try to have an artist in the room, so that's okay. Number one.
So they might potentially cut the song and release it with their own artist project.
Yeah, exactly. Or it turns into pitch, and then we send it out as a pitch song. The other version of it is that like we have a brief of artists that we know that are looking for songs, so that like the room will write for that specific artist, and then we'll pitch the song.
Give me an example of that if people aren't familiar with what a brief means for a specific artist.
Yeah, like major labels have this for the most part. It's called a Who's Looking list. It's something that's been happening for a long time. Basically, they send out just like a Google sheet, and it lists their artists and then what type of songs and sessions they're looking for. It doesn't mean that you're going to get the song to them, but it means that you have some insight of what they're looking for. So from there, it's like they get a brief. They know that the artists are looking for, let's say, something that sounds like a Dua Lipa track, but like not necessarily a Dua Lipa track, but it meets a Bon Iver song or what, some crazy ass shit. And then so they're gonna be like, okay, we're gonna try to write something that day. So they write something that day, and then from there, it's the reps and us are like sending the song out to said artist that like is looking for that and seeing if they would be interested in cutting it. So that's the other process of that.
Cool.
Same thing with K-pop. We work directly with a company called Creation, which is SM Entertainment's publishing arm. So we have directly pitched to them for their big K-pop artists like groups like NCT, all the NCTs and like everything else, you know, that they're working on. So there's like all these different avenues. And so in the songwriting camp, they come in and they know exactly what they're going to be writing for that day.
And what are they looking to accomplish in that session, and how long are these sessions?
Yeah, so a session's typically like give or take like 6 hours plus like a lunch break. You know, that's usually what it is. And they're just trying to hit a target. That's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to hit a target for an artist. And if the artist is in there, great. You know, and that they have an idea of like what their project is looking like. And then they could come up with ideas, pitch it to the artist there in the room, and then maybe they catch a vibe and they're like, "Oh, great!" And then they just start writing. You know, like that's usually the organic way of it to happen. And that's the beauty that, you know, anyone could set up a session. It's a matter of like, will these people come up with something that's like new and something that like really resonates with the artist that they're trying to reach or they're working with.
And so you like the goal is to get a completed song out of Imagine, and then are they like demoing it within that 6 hours, and somebody in there, maybe the artist or someone, is going to sing it, and there's a producer in the room that's actually making it. So like after the 6 hours, you theoretically everybody goes home with a bounce of you know, a wave, and it's like, oh, this is a listenable demo that then you can go off and pitch like right there. Is that kind of one of the goals of a session?
Yeah. Most of the time, everything lives in the bounce, right? So they have the bounce from the day of, and you have that's how you have the song, and then from there, it's like. If you send it to artists or the artist is one of the co-writers on it, they're going to hold on to it. And then you just kind of have to check in with them and see if they're going to want to keep the song.
Or you can start sending it around.
Yeah. Or will they let us pitch the song out? So that's where you have to try to figure out like where their head's at. But ultimately, if they want to cut the song, then most of the time they'll ask to bring the team back together, or they'll go to that producer who was in the room. And if they don't have like an EP for the whole project, they'll have the producer finish the song. So they'll do that.
Cool.
And then if they like the song and they want to put it out, then from there it's just figuring out who's going to mix it and master it, and then it's off to the races after that.
Yeah. In general, what are you seeing in terms of how many artists are in rooms versus in the songs that come out of sessions in general, writing camp or not? How many songs come out of sessions where the artist is there and they're going to cut it and release it on their record, versus how many songs come out of sessions that are going to get pitched out to other artists that weren't actually in the room at the time?
Yeah, I'd say the shift of the last 10 years has been going towards the artist wanting to be in the room. Yeah, so that's like a huge thing. Especially now, especially when people are really drawn towards like artists and they're invested in them, like off social media and stuff, and they're really trying to get to be attached to the artist. They want to know if they wrote it, so that's why some of the biggest artists in the world are the ones that are like, yeah, I wrote the record. I mean, I had help. I had songwriters with me. I had a producer with me. If let's say if like I didn't produce the record myself, and that's definitively what's going to make it like really personal and to them. And so now I think more artists are like wanting to be the co-writer in the room. And you could just look at it at like Dua Lipa, like she has co-writing on everything, but she's in the room. She's like writing the song. I don't think, she doesn't really take outside songs. Really, outside songs are, some people are still doing it. Obviously, there's still like R&B artists too that will definitely take some outside songs, and then maybe they'll like recut the, maybe they'll write a new verse or write whatever or tweak something. And then other than that, it's like country. Country is the number one like genre where people are pitching songs not written by them that will get placed. I think that's the biggest thing. So, but that's also like, par for the course, it's just country music. People write songs. People just sit down with guitars and they just write a song. It's a demo. Maybe they record it on something really easy, and then they just send it off and see if the country people like it.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You know, like we recently had Matthew Ramsey, the lead singer of Old Dominion, on the show, and he was talking about, because he's both. He's the band is massive, and they're touring arenas, and massive fan base for Old Dominion, but also he's a songwriter in Nashville as a working songwriter, writing songs for other artists as well. And we talked extensively about kind of the Nashville songwriting process of that. So if anyone listening is interested in like the Nashville style of country songwriting and that, go listen to that episode. For people that are listening right now that are emerging, aspiring songwriters, and they want to be a professional songwriter, they want to have cuts, they want to, produce, like, what is your advice to them to potentially get become a professional songwriter, maybe to sign with Angry Mob or anyone else, or they want a pub deal? Like, how does someone go about that? Yeah,
I would say good rule of thumb for anything creatively, I think, in the arts, is that you got to put in your 1,000 hours, right? You got to, like, first off, listen to music. If you're not listening to music on the regular, like, what are you doing? That's literally your school. No one's going to...
You got to pick a different profession.
Yeah, no one's going to teach you how to make a good song. I mean, you could pay someone to teach you how to make a good song and stuff, but really it's like listening. So first off, listen to as much different music as you can, and really find your inspiration. From there, step 2 is really like keep writing. Write 100 terrible songs. You're gonna write 100 terrible songs before you get to a song that's like okay. It's like I'm in. I've been the lead singer of a band since this band called Cuffed Up since 2018, 2019, and like I wrote a shit ton of shitty songs before we got to like the songs that got us at least some attention people actually liked. So really that would be the number 2 thing I would say. It's basically like, write, keep writing and keep writing. And then from there, it's like finding your community. Like that's huge. None of us, there's no such thing as a golden ticket. And that's something I need to like really like double down on. It's like, people say like, oh, overnight success. They said that about Shibuzi. I was like, homie, he's been sleeping on couches since, 10 years ago. I know, this producer friend of mine named Doug, like Shibuzi was sleeping on his couch 10 years ago because his girlfriend kicked him out or whatever, and like, then next thing you know, Doug has songwriting credit on that album because he was there. Like he was literally there and
brushing his teeth while Shibuzi woke up.
Exactly.
Right?
So to me, like, I think community and having those connections and building those relationships, that's key. None of us publishers are going to be like, I'm more deterred by people that are like thinking like, oh, I deserve this because I've been doing it for so long. Right. Yet the songs aren't really that strong, and you think that you could do this by yourself, and you're like really introverted. Not saying being introvert's a bad thing, but like you're not finding your community and writing and really networking yourself. If I don't see you networking yourself, I'm less inclined to sign you, because I know that if I sign you, even if you're talented, you're going to be depending on me to do your entire job to basically like help you make friends, and I can't. I can't do that. So that would be the 3 big things for sure.
And do you think if someone wants to be a professional songwriter, they need to be out in LA or Nashville?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, it's not like screenwriting where you could be in the middle of like Ohio and you could write a great script and send it out and you get reps. Like that's a whole different thing. When you're a songwriter, you need to be in the room. Like we talked about it. You need to be in the room and be writing. With these people. People aren't accepting outside songs. Artists aren't accepting outside songs as frequently, and it's not going to come with like, it's not going to, again, it's not the golden ticket. It's not a golden ticket. Yeah. So Nashville and LA, I think the 2 biggest.
Those are the 2.
Those are the 2 biggest. People jump between those 2. New York isn't as active as it used to be. Still stuff there, great. And there's a lot of great writers out there, but what I've been seeing mostly is people ping pong between LA and Nashville, just because that's where the songwriting is. Like, the sessions are really happening.
Yeah, right on. Well, Ralph, this was so informative and illuminating. I really appreciate you breaking everything down and being so transparent about it all. Hopefully we don't get you in too much trouble.
No, I don't care. It was
great.
At this point, that's just who I am who I am. So
yeah.
I'd rather.
And I love
I'd rather
that.
be
I love that about you. And it's great. And this is, everyone listening to this is I can speak for them saying that it's like they're so appreciative that they are getting a look behind the curtain. And it is a very confusing business, and not a lot of people are sharing the information or being open about it. And so I appreciate that you are one of those few people that are sharing and open about it.
Of course, as a songwriter and musician myself, I think the biggest advocacy I could do for songwriters is make it as transparent as possible. I think that's the biggest thing.
Love that. Yeah, thank you. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, making it, success is so subjective too. I feel like that's something, if making it is like sustainably making, a living off of music, that where let's say you're an artist and you're like touring and you have fans that are still dedicated to you that will come out to shows, and you could create your art and still, like have the lights on. I think that would probably be making it in a lot of ways in the new music business. But man, there's even ways where there's writers and songwriters I know who have these bands that maybe won't play every couple of years because they have another life, being a mom or a dad or like doing something else that they really love. But they're still making it because they're doing what they love, and they're able to do it, which is, I think, the biggest thing to me when I hear making it, is like they're able to do it, and they still have the love for it.